Last week, I came across an article that stopped me in my tracks. Goldman Sachs released a survey that said that 40% of 500k earners live paycheck to paycheck, and this sent shockwaves across the internet. If those earning 500k a year who happen to be in the top 2% of earners are really living paycheck to paycheck, then a lot of people are in trouble. What hope is there for those who live on a fraction of that amount? In fact, many young people feel like they are running on a treadmill. They're working harder, but they're not getting anywhere. And unfortunately, the numbers back it up. A recent Bank of America survey found that 42% of Gen Z reported living paycheck to paycheck, with nearly half saying that the cost of living is the biggest barrier to their financial success. And according to a study by NerdWallet, the average millennial won't be able to retire until age 75. So in this video, I am going to share 5 practical actions that we can take to rise above these problems, because it's still possible to create financial security for yourself and even retire early if you choose to. But first, let's talk about how on earth we got here, why millennials and Gen Zers are struggling financially. If we haven't met, my name is Jumoke, and I worked as an investment banker for close to 2 decades prior to retiring from my 9-to-5 job. I post videos every Sunday on personal investing and finance and practical things that over the years helped me become financially free before the age of 40. So, how exactly did we end up here? Well, the first challenge is that the housing cost to income ratio has risen. Housing is becoming less and less affordable. Rents have been going up steadily every year, yet wages haven't kept up, and rent takes up a huge portion of your paycheck, making it a lot harder to save money. Now, since the 1960s, the average price of a home has gone up by more than 110%, and that's only after accounting or adjusting for inflation. Without factoring in inflation, the average price of a home has gone up by approximately 3,290% since the 1960s. A typical house in the 1950s or the 1960s was generally a modest starter home that cost around 2 to 3 times the average annual salary. But today, that number is between 6 to 7 times. Nowadays, young adults have the lowest home ownership rates ever because it's just too expensive. Of course, unaffordable housing is a problem for everyone, whether you're young or not, except for one small detail, which brings me to the second challenge: student loans. Despite being the most educated generation ever, young people have a ton of student debt. According to recent research, there was around 470 billion in outstanding student loan debt for borrowers aged 25 to 34. And this translates to around 33,000 on average for each student loan borrower. Now, obviously, lots of millennials graduate with significantly more than that, especially those who go on to further education, such as a postgraduate degree. And the mountain of student debt that graduates leave school with means that young people will be making payments on their debt well into their 30s or their 40s instead of saving that money towards retirement. And so even with all of the tech advances and economic prosperity, young people are getting left behind financially. Data from the Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances found that millennials hold significantly less wealth, often cited as around 40 to 41% less on average than baby boomers or Gen Xers held when they were the exact same age. Now, the main reason for the rise in student loan debt is the rise in cost of college tuition. In 1980, the average student could expect to pay around $9,600 to get a degree, which is practically nothing now. And based on 2026 numbers of average college tuition costs, you can expect to pay around $100,000 on average to get a degree. Now, of course, this varies depending on the institution. And so doing the maths, rising rents, unaffordable home prices, rising tuition costs, and lagging wages, these have all resulted in a widening wealth gap between the young and the old. Now, the next challenge to unfortunately add to this list is the asset price bubble over the last 20 to 30 years. During the 2008 financial crisis and the pandemic, the world went into a recession. And to help us get out of that, central banks started printing trillions and trillions of new money and quantitative easing, which inflated asset prices. And it ended up widening the gap between young and old, and also the haves and the have-nots. So thanks to loose monetary policy, asset prices have gone up. Now, of course, this is awesome if you own assets. But on average, millennials and the average young person does not own much. And coupled with this is the issue that receives, in my opinion, less attention: government debt. Now, this chart shows the debt to GDP ratio for several countries. Take the US, for example. The debt to GDP ratio is currently at around 121%. That's like making $100,000 and having $121,000 of debt. Coupled with this is the rising cost of borrowing for many governments. And the bottom line is that when debt keeps rising, it doesn't just go away by itself. Eventually, you have to come face to face with it and figure out a way to pay it down. So politicians can only kick the can down the road for so long, and inevitably, it's going to be future generations that will be forced to make the sacrifices. They'll have to deal with higher taxes, reduced public services, slower economic growth, or inflationary pressures as governments attempt to manage this debt burden. Okay, so we have looked at the challenges. Let's now switch gears to something more positive and talk about what we can actually do about all of this. So here are 5 practical ways that young people can improve their financial future. Debt is often one of the biggest obstacles to building wealth. And so the first practical step is to reduce or pay down high interest debt. Most people forget that every dollar that is spent on interest is a dollar that is stolen from your savings and your investments. It's a dollar that won't grow or compound over time. And compounding can either work for you in the way of savings and investments by growing your wealth, or it can work against you in way of debt. In the past, advertisers could only reach us via billboards or newspapers or TV ads. And now, in the age of social media and 24-hour marketing, the average person gets exposed to thousands of marketing messages per day, all thanks to our smartphones that are pretty much in our hands all day long. This, of course, makes it very hard for us to break out of the trap of consumerism, because we are constantly getting bombarded with things that are tempting to buy, which makes it harder for us to get out of the cycle of mindless purchases and credit card debt. And the only way, it seems, to get ahead financially, apart from going off-grid completely, is to get clear on your core values. Otherwise, these marketers are going to tell you what your core values should be, because they're very good at human psychology and getting you to buy things you don't need. I always remind myself that there will always be another shiny object to buy after this one. The second practical action, and not to get all political here, but the second action is to vote, to be counted. Many of the issues we've raised so far are economic in nature: housing affordability, student debt, taxation, government spending, and labor policies. But the one thing they all have in common is that they are influenced by public policy. Now, I'm not saying that voting solves everything, of course not. But it does influence who makes decisions about our economic future. Young people often complain about the system while participating less and less in the process that shapes it. And so let's get involved. We need to vote and make our voices heard. Otherwise, politicians will keep making policies that benefit a few and not the masses. Corporations will keep polluting the environment. Wealth gaps will keep getting wider, and we, the younger generation, will continue getting the short end of the stick. The next practical thing that you can do is to start growing and compounding your money as soon as possible. One of the biggest advantages that young people still have is time. And the rule of 72 is one of the most powerful ways to show just how important time is in your investing journey. Now, for those who may not know, the rule of 72 is a simplified formula that calculates how long it would take for an investment to double in value based on its rate of return. And I posted a video that explains how the rule of 72 works and how you can apply it to your own investments, and I'll link it below. You don't need thousands to start. And the great thing is that many investment platforms allow people to begin with very small amounts. And these small amounts made consistently can significantly grow through compounding. As I said before, compounding either works against you in way of debt or for you in way of your investments and your savings. As young people, we generally don't have as much money as older individuals. However, what we have on our side is time. And time in the stock market is a huge factor on how much money you can make through investing. And one can actually argue that it is a bigger factor than how much you actually start investing with. Waiting just 10 years to start investing means that you'll have to invest almost 2.5 times more of your own money in order to accumulate the same nest egg as someone who started 10 years before. If two 25-year-olds want a nest egg of around $1 million by the age of 65, which is a 40-year window, at an average 7% return, the math breaks down as follows. Investor A starts at 25, needs to contribute approximately $286 a month, and this equates to a total out-of-pocket money invested of approximately $137,000. Now take investor B, who waits 10 years and starts investing at age 35. This investor needs to contribute approximately $622 a month to catch up to the same $1 million goal in 30 years. This equates to a total out-of-pocket money invested of approximately $224,000. The gap is massive because waiting just 10 years impacts your wealth in two fundamental ways. The first is lost principal. You now have 120 fewer months to contribute your own money. And the second is time lost in the market. You lose the returns your first 10 years of contributions would have generated over the subsequent 30 years. Time in market is often more powerful than trying to perfectly time the market. So the sooner you get started, the better. The fourth action that you can take starting today is to build what I call an income ecosystem. One of the biggest financial shifts happening right now is that the younger generation are realizing that a single paycheck is often no longer enough. Previous generations could rely on one employer, one salary, one pension. Today's economy is completely different. Instead of depending on a singular source of income, many millennials and Gen Z workers are building an income ecosystem. And this is a collection of earnings that work together to create financial stability. And this could include your primary job, dividend-paying investments, interests, rental income, digital products, content creation, consulting, online businesses, and frankly, the list goes on. If one source of income disappears, you're not starting from zero, and the data shows that this trend is only accelerating. According to a recent study by Intuit QuickBooks, nearly 47% of Americans reported earning income from a side hustle, showing how secondary income has become a mainstream survival and financial strategy. Another study found that last year, side hustlers earned an average of $885 per month, while more than 1/3 reported using this money for everyday living expenses such as housing, grocery, and bills. In other words, side income has shifted from a nice bonus to a financial necessity. It's about creating a buffer against inflation, layoffs, a rise in housing costs, and economic uncertainty. The fifth practical thing that you can do is to not leave money on the table. Your tax strategy is just as important as your investment strategy. Take advantage of tax-free and retirement accounts. With rising national debt levels and the crumbling welfare state, I'm willing to bet that taxes in the future are going to be going higher and not lower. And this is why you should maximize all of your tax-shielded accounts. Let me show you just how powerful tax-free accounts are and something that most people don't realize. Let's say two investors start with $100,000 and earn the same 8% return over 20 years. The first investor uses a tax-free or a tax-shielded account, and after 20 years, they end up with roughly $466,000. The second investor, however, invests in a taxable account and loses roughly 25% of their gains to taxes along the way. They end up with only $321,000. That's a difference of more than $145,000. And this isn't because investor A picked better stocks or because they took more risk. It's simply because one investor protected their compounding from taxes. And this is why some of the wealthiest investors in the world don't just focus on returns from their investments. They also focus on how to keep more of those returns. And this is also why a tax strategy can be just as important as your investment strategy, because you can never be too sure of how big your tax bill is going to be in the future. If your income stays the same and your tax rate stays the same, then you're going to be fine. However, if your taxes go up, you're not going to be very happy about it. And based on everything we've talked about, I think it's safe to assume that taxes are going to go up from here and not down. Now imagine having invested $30,000 and maybe some of your stocks or your investments completely take off and your portfolio grows to $780,000. If in a tax-free account, you get to keep all of that money. But if in a taxable account, well, the tax man or woman is going to be knocking at your door for their portion of those returns. And this is exactly why you should definitely take advantage of these accounts whilst they're still available. Now, here's something that most people often forget. The reality of building wealth today may require a completely different strategy than it did for previous generations. However, the process remains the same. Invest wisely. reduce debt, have a tax strategy, stay politically engaged, and most importantly, focus on the financial decisions that you can actually control. Because whilst the system may not be perfect, your financial future is being shaped by the choices you make today. Let me know in the comment section, do you think that young people, millennials, Gen Zers, are financially worse off than previous generations, or do you think things are just different today? I'll see you in the next video. Look after yourselves. Bye for now.